Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Real Talk. That's Real Talk for real estate investors. This is podcast number 43. My name is Chris Sanino. I'm with the Freedom Real Estate family of companies. And today I have Dale Hayward, who we had the pleasure of introducing on our previous vlog episode, who's the maintenance supervisor for Independence Property Management. Today we're talking about the long-term property maintenance planning strategy that we use here at this company. A lot of stuff goes into just taking into account properties and maintenance, things that happen on a regular basis, and trying to plan in a way that's beneficial not just to the resident and the asset, but also to our owners, our clients.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Planning is important because it's also gives an owner a chance to not have to outlay a whole bunch of money for a project when they could maybe portion out or say, hey, this is coming.
Right.
Know this is coming. It helps. It softens the landing.
Yeah. Thinking of a couple just scenarios of that's just been that is recently we had an inspection. It was a HUD inspection through Section 8, and they had for those of you that do Section 8 are familiar with that. They have very, very specific guidelines, and sometimes their inspection list can be a little bit daunting. Even if you prepare for them, sometimes I very rarely see an inspection list from Section 8 that doesn't have several items on it. But this one in particular that I was thinking about, I think it was in November, December. Ground's already frozen, and they requested that we resurface the entire driveway. And I was like, yeah, that's not going to happen. When we even got a couple quotes, and they were like, yeah, I can't get to this until the ground softens up and we're able to, do that properly. I'm sure there's companies out there that would do it in the winter, but we wanted to have a longevity and quality product put down. So we had to set that expectation a little bit. Like, hey, yeah, we definitely need to get this done. Right. I agree with you, but we need to.
Yeah, the laws of physics apply.
Yeah. So that's just one example of having a plan is important, and the answer isn't necessarily no. It's just smart investments say not to do it right now.
Right, and windows or roofs, and any of those things that are not emergent issues,
right,
but need to be addressed. You can say, hey, well, this is going to cost this much to do over this much, and if we take a percentage over this much time,
right,
it won't be an oh my gosh, we have to do this.
Yeah, windows is a big thing when it comes to that. When you start looking at windows on a property, very rarely is there just one that's faulty.
Right.
I know we're going through that with a larger multifamily we have right now under management, that several of the windows were fine. They were operational, but not maybe the best windows. Right. And now tenants are in there and they're using them, and now we're seeing them fail. And especially for ground floor units where it's a safety concern for egress purposes, there's some urgency to do that. But at the same time, between ordering a window and it takes 4 to 8 weeks or whatever to get them in, and also the fact that it's cold as all get out outside, single digits this week. I mean, it's not realistic to replace the windows.
If it's not a broken window, it's time to step back and take a breath and go, okay, well, this is something we can live with over the winter.
Right. Yeah. Of course, we try to prioritize anything a safety issue.
Right.
Like you said, emergent issues, we definitely want to get addressed immediately, but being smart and strategic about planning. So, and we call those seasonal repairs. There's definitely a time and a place to do those. Right. Obviously, if a roof goes bad and it's a foot of snow,
right,
it's leaking, or we see drastic drafts or something, we have to do something about it immediately. But it's just something hey, the roof is aged. There's definitely some shingles that need to be replaced. Right. Okay, we're going to get that set up in spring unless there's an emergent leaking problem. And I know that you and Chris, the other maintenance technician, and a couple of the GCs, the general contractors we have that do some maintenance stuff, do pay attention to those things, and do notate when we have some things that may come out. I think storm doors is also on that list.
Storm doors are, yes. and everybody loves storm doors and hates storm doors at the same time. So it's, and everybody thinks that a storm door is going to, honestly enough, a good storm door will help with drafts in the wintertime. But some places don't have them, and there's a reason they don't have them, or
Right.
So and then when they break, is it emergent?
Right. Yeah, it's kind of a gray area. We actually rely a little bit on our owner's discretion on that.
Right.
Storm doors aren't too expensive to replace. I think we're talking about like $100
Yeah,
plus,
it's like,
plus some labor maybe, but
a couple $100 by the time you're
right.
done.
Yeah, but that is like that can be a make it or break it thing for the resident. Like they're like, look, which is weird, by the way. I want to say I don't buy or rent properties based on whether or not it has a storm door or not,
Right.
but we've heard it in multiple times. Like, hey, the fact that I can have a storm door is a big selling point for me, and like residents are like, listen, if the owner doesn't want to pay for it, I'll pay for it.
Right.
Which we don't always encourage, but at the same time, it's like, okay, well,
we've heard that recently.
Yeah, we've heard that. Well, yeah, at least one time in the last couple of months, and so then it becomes like, okay, well, now it's a different conversation with the client and trying to figure out how to mitigate that.
Right.
So I want to talk about like our inspection process, because honestly, on the buyer end, so on the owner's end, like that's one thing that we talk about when we're onboarding them. Mark talks about when they're in the sales process, like, okay, well, how often is a property management company going to be in the property? Like, are we gonna know halfway through a lease if the tenant's good, if they're taking care of the asset? We make that like that comes up when we talk about renewals. Like, okay, well, how's the property look? Is the tenant taking care of it? So there is inspections in our contract, and then we also do additional inspections for a fee if needed. But one of the things you kind of brought to the table when you came on board, we started shoveling through all of our backlog maintenance stuff and trying to do better in that regard, is you started looking at things holistically and said, look, I inspect the property every time we go. Right. If I'm fixing, we talked about before we got on the podcast, if I'm fixing a sink, I'm touching the plumbing, I'm going to inspect the plumbing. Right. And I'm going to keep eyes on other things and try to identify some deferred maintenance stuff. You want to speak to that just a little
bit? I joke around in the office, I'm the bearer of bad news most of the time, because I'll go into a property and I'll be sent in to fix a leaky sink drain, and a tenant will say, it's really cold in here. I mean, the heater doesn't seem to work very well, and I'll go down into the basement just to see what's going on and find out that there's no insulation on any of the ductwork, which means all the heat's in the basement.
Yeah, it's in the basement.
Yeah. I mean, it's working great. The heater's working great and everything's working great, but if it's all getting heat loss, it's not very efficient for the tenant or the house. It's not good for the house either. So so I'll mention that I'll also look at how well everything's constructed and if there's anything that's been when we rehab a property, we don't we do everything we have to do and need to do to make that property whole, but those are not brand new properties. We didn't build those from
ground up. Yeah, no, they're not complete rebuilds.
And so things change. You know, things change even after rehab. I mean, foundations move and
tenants get in there and slam a couple doors too hard, and all of a sudden the jam's all messed up.
Somebody's got 5 kids and they're all boys. That happens too. So
one toddler that puts the wrong thing in the toilet. Those things happen.
Right.
So going in and identifying, getting eyes on it. I mean, we talk about we've been talking about this a lot more recently as we are focusing more on like resident feeling and how the residents are communicating and how they're engaged and share some accountability to how the property operates. We talk about them being included in the maintenance process, preparing, like if they want you to paint a patch on the wall, like moving their couch so you can access the patch on the wall, things like that. And when we talk about that, like looking at all of those items when you go in is definitely helps the resident experience a lot more, and then also sets a standard. We talk about make face a little bit. Sometimes you and Chris go out there just to say, hey, like, I want to look at this, I want to get eyes on it, take a couple photos. Our team's working on scheduling some trade to go out and handle the situation, just to kind of diffuse the situation a little bit.
I also try to, and I encourage Chris to do this too. I when I go out to a property, if I'm working on this thing, if I see a light bulb out or this needs to be done and it's a minor repair or something I can do that doesn't cost us anything but a few minutes time, I will do that extra thing and say,
Right.
hey, and then maybe educate the tenant on, if you do this way, it'll save you from
Right.
having to do anything else. And, that helps too. And they feel like people need to feel like they're being heard.
Right. Yeah, that's a big thing. And it helps with maintenance planning too, because we have some owners that are like, look, I get a work order every single month. Why is that? It's like, well, just, we're going to try to mitigate and help identify things in advance.
Right.
But the other thing is, like, it's also good that your resident's communicating and telling us that there's issues. So then we'll send you out there and be like, okay, we've been out here twice. Like, what are all your problems?
Right.
Let's make a list and let's just take care of as much as we can. And then set the expectation that, okay, this is not an emergent issue. This is something we definitely do, but maybe we just need to plan a little bit more.
Right.
Sorry, you don't like the windows, but they're functional. Like,
Right.
it's not realistic for us to change those. Right. Set some expectations, but then bring that back to the table for the owner. Like, hey, just so you know, we did nip this window discussion in the butt, but
it still needs to be
we still
mitigated.
need to look at it. The cost is going to be this.
Right.
You may have 6 months, before it becomes an issue again.
Right.
And then that way the owner is informed and can make a financial adjustment if needed, while the resident's still happy. They're probably 75% satisfied in the result of that situation. They're definitely going to bring the window back up again.
Right. Well, and what I've discovered is that a good tenant is a good tenant. Once they felt like we are good custodians for them, they show a lot more respect for the property. They show more respect for the system, and oddly enough, our work order list goes down, in those places. There are some buildings can be chronic. You can have issues with buildings just because of their, like I said, their age. Some of these buildings are 100+ years old.
Right.
They're in great shape. That's why they're 100+ years old, because they're
still standing. They're still solid.
Yeah. So, but they have their own unique issues. Ground settles, cracks appear, and the more educated the tenant is, it's like, oh my gosh, there's a crack in our. That's just a settling crack, and we can address that now, or we can wait till the weather changes.
Yeah.
Because we're going to be addressing it again when it gets hot.
Right, because it's gonna. Yeah, we talk about that with expansion of like floor. We were talking about floors earlier today. Yeah, floors move and they adjust based on temperature and humidity and a few other factors.
Right.
It's like we can mitigate it when it happens, but when it happens again, like it's just expanding the other way.
Right.
Instead of shrinking, it's expanding. Like so, some of that's just education, like you said. Like, okay, you're right. This is probably an issue. We should probably address this, but let's step back. Let's take a beat.
Right.
Breath. Let's think about this. Get the owners involved where we need to, and then make decisions. A few things that we kind of you brought on when you came on too is you have some background in HVAC, and even though you currently hold a licensure to carry that on, but the experience matters, and so we started looking at like filter services and just general like 2 times a year HVAC services that will just come out and just check the system, make sure they're functioning. We got a plan for the winter for the furnace services. They were rolling out as it all of a sudden got cold. So we're still dealing with some of those furnaces, but I think we're in a good position for the spring to be in a good position to get AC services before we need the ACs. Right. One thing that we kind of added and folded into that is obviously they check the air filters.
Right.
They clean the units. They look at the ductwork. They determine, hey, you've got maybe 2 years left on your furnace. Or, hey, your AC, we charged it. We did what we needed to. We updated this circuit or this board or this condenser, whatever the situation is, but you have X number of years. Or, hey, it's going to last you this year, but it's not going to cool down the way you want it to. Right. That way we can have those discussions with the owners. Like, hey, by the way, this is our price range for our ACs and our furnaces. And like, you may have to
Right, and it's nice. It's nice if you get a good vendor that can give you a time frame, and give you a guesstimate. A good roofer that says, "Hey, you've got another 4 years left on your roof," and and things of that nature, so that okay, I've got 4 years to save.
Yeah.
For for a new roof, or a new AC unit, and. With the filters, it's nice. What's nice is, and something that it would be wonderful to do is as we move forward to get the way the units are set up a lot. Sometimes a tenant cannot change
the filters. No.
If we switch to filter grills, in the cold air returns, or when work is done on the heating unit, if they could put in a simpler, easier way to insert. So then it can, because if the tenant can replace those on a regular basis, it's going to add to the lifespan of the unit.
Yeah, so to talk on that point, like one of the things, we just rolled out a resident benefit package, which we're going to talk about more in a different podcast. But one of the details that's in that's included that's going to be rolling out is like a filter service,
right?
Because it's in their lease, like they need to change. They're responsible for changing it, right. But most of them don't, unless they've owned a home and they understand the importance of it. Right. And again, that goes back to education. Like make sure we're having regular conversations right. about it. It's in our resident newsletter, like things like that. But you guys pay attention to that when you're on site too. So if we're there for, hey, my unit's not heating up, or hey, it's not cooling down, right. One of the first things we look at is the machine able to breathe? Right. Is the air filter changed? And then also changes the price, like the billing. Like the resident changed the filter, we're going to charge them for a filter replacement. Right. And the owners love that. It's also something that we're talking about years on the lifespan of a system, is if the filters change regularly. Yeah, we're not talking about days or months. I mean, it's a year's calculation. Right. And being on top of that's important.
And knowing your tenants, I mean, a single person with no pets is not going to create as much dust and stuff in the house that they're going to clog the filter, so their filter can go a little longer. But if you've got 5 kids and three cats, you're going to have an issue, right. Almost on a monthly basis. So, and in those cases, if we can't make it easy, you have to make it easy for people to do the right thing sometimes. Right. And so in some of those units, you have to literally open up the unit to put
the filters in.
And we don't want our tenants doing that.
Right, absolutely not. No. So we are kind of shifting the process a little bit on that. But again, the benefit comes like we're in the properties quite a bit. Right. We can do inspections periodically just because, right? And so when we start seeing like HVAC and furnace and other issues that can be mitigated by something simple like a filter change, right. or even if we have to go in and like change the batteries on the smoke alarm, right. like that's a good time to also check, hey, I'm gonna go ahead and check your furnace while I'm here, right. and we just have a stock of furnace filters. Now granted, there's some size differences. Some of them have wonky ones, but mitigating that up front. And that's a really low cost thing for the owner. Like the cost benefit of changing a filter is astronomical because a furnace ranges from $3,000 to $5,000 right. depending on the age and efficiency and all those factors and size.
And these days, I mean, I've talked to vendors and they only have a lifespan of about 15 years as it is.
Right.
I mean, so and that's crazy to me, but that's but a 15-year cycle, and there again, that's a long-term maintenance thing. Okay, how old is this unit? You if we've been servicing it for 5 years, and it's only got 15, in another, well, hopefully you have it for another 10, and it's the same tenant in there.
Yeah, that'd be yeah. But I mean, knowing in advance, so we do rely a little bit on skilled trades for those things, but we can help mitigate on the front end a little bit of the expectation. Again, education for the resident, some education for owners is needed. Right. But if the owner's equipped, like if our clients are equipped with that information, like, hey, you only have 2 years left in this.
Right.
You're probably 10 years into your lifespan here. Serviced it today, cleaned it. It looks good, but there are some failing parts that are not going to be replaceable. The owner can then make a CapEx decision. They can say, you know what, I've got a little room in my budget. It's been a good year. 2021 served me pretty good.
Right.
Resident paid on time. My portfolio was performing. Didn't have a lot of expenses. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and drop $3,000 on the furnace.
Right.
Go ahead and just get it done. And then all of a sudden they have a tax write-off too.
Yeah,
and,
I was going to say, it's a good write-off at the end of the
so
year.
I mean, but it's better to be in a position to make that decision before it's an emergency, right? Because once we have the conversation, hey, your tenant's without heat because the furnace that we told you last year only had a year left on it. We didn't change it then, but now it's 2 degrees. Well, it's going to be like 8 degrees on Friday.
Yes.
Hey, they don't have heat. It's 8 degrees outside. How much of a decision here? Like we have to replace their furnace. All of a sudden, you're backed into a wall, and you don't have the ability to make a decision based on no knowledge, right? So that's instrumental.
In my perfect world, there's no emergent problems. The random burst pipe, or because it was old and it was inside a wall that you couldn't get to. We can't help that. But, the things that we can help and we can be proactive about, it's going to be better for everybody.
Yeah, it's funny you brought up old pipe because I saw a work order today. I was going over a statement for an owner and clarifying a few expenses, and one of the expenses was check on age of galvanized piping to determine like next steps on whether or not we should replace or not. And that's an interesting thing. I'm actually, honestly, this time last year I wasn't seeing a lot of work orders like that, but I immediately thought of, okay, that's preventative maintenance. Like there's probably not an active issue with that galvanized pipe, but we probably recognized it when we were there. There's probably some sort of leak or something going on, and now we're like, okay, how many feet of this stuff are we dealing with? Right. Do we see any deterioration marks or areas where it's maybe falling apart? And that was a win. Like the owner had to pay $45 for that inspection, but that's probably going to save him thousands in plumbing repairs down the road.
Well, I mean, because it's a lot cheaper to replace galvanized pipe when you're not working on pumping the water out of the basement. When you can plan it and you can say, we can replace all of this because it isn't a super big expense.
Right.
In the exposed areas to replace that.
Right. Well, especially since we try to use PEX or PVC drains or things like that. Yes. So, there's definitely technology that is in our favor to get things done cost effectively without having to replace them in 5 years.
Right. I mean, looking at a cast iron trunk line, sewer trunk line, you see a cast iron sewer trunk line in a basement and you say, well, that's been there for 75, 100 years. Yay for it.
Right. Yeah.
I would definitely put that as a goal to have that replaced with PVC.
Yeah, actually, that's you bring up a good point there. So we've had some pains with cast iron drains in general because they ultimately will fail.
Right.
And so I've had some acquisitions where owners have talked to me like, hey, Chris, I'm thinking about taking this property on. And I get the inspection report because that's usually how it goes. If they're under contract, I look at their inspection reports to set expectations of what they can expect from a resident. And right in the middle of the inspection is this big old picture of a galvanized pipe, and it's teeing off and wying, and it's like 20 feet of pipe. And I'm just like, bro, that's got to go. Yeah. And they're like, really? Why? And I'm like, yeah, you want to get rid of it now while it's still intact? Otherwise, we're talking about when it breaks, like you're not going to be able to mitigate it for just a couple $1,000s. Like it's going to be 10. I think we had one that was the line when it broke. We repaired the section, and then because of the break, it had stressed it somewhere else, and then it broke 3 or 4 other places. And by the time we were done, it was like a $13,000 job, because we had to tear up stuff outside. And if we can mitigate that quickly, then we don't have that the large expense down the road.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because I was going to say that in a multifamily unit, when you've got most apartment complexes or multi-story units, they've stacked the bathrooms and the kitchens on top of each other.
Right.
So there are common wall chases where all of that plumbing for everything is going up one wall.
Yeah.
And
servicing multiple units.
right. So when you have an emergency, I mean, in one of the units, my assumption is that if it's bad here,
Right.
it's bad above it or below it.
And if it isn't now, it will be as soon as we cut into this and start tearing it out.
So I mean, so when you replace it there, yes, I mean you don't want to kick out a tenant above you or below you to do more work, but you can say, well, we know that the next time this is vacant, or maybe in a few months or in a year, we could maybe plan to go into this unit and connect up to the good stuff.
Right.
So that eventually you're honestly upgrading the whole building.
Yeah, you could potentially even buy the materials in advance. So you just have them like, hey, this is 123 Main Street for when we do this repair. Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. And honestly, we're doing more and more of that. It's tough sometimes to gauge that, but I mean, honestly, it's certain things like that, cast iron pipes, you can kind of just know that if it's not functioning in one area, it's probably not going to work in other areas.
Right, and we try to clear the drains and clean them out, and that's usually when the trouble begins, is because you're dealing with old galvanized pipe and you're cleaning it out. When you say cleaning it out, what you're doing is you're grinding it out with a piece of equipment, and hopefully none of that is so thin over the years that you aren't going to have an issue. But you have to do it. It has to drain.
Absolutely.
So, and these are things that in rehab you don't see. It's hidden in the walls, and it's just not part of it. Unless it is.
Yeah, and quick fixes in that situation are not ideal. So no Flex Seal, no weird wraps or anything. Like the Band-Aid repairs are just that, they're Band-Aids. You've got to mitigate it quickly and fast, or if it's not an active issue, just budget for it. Right, and we know it's coming.
Exactly. If you do have to go in an emergency, you do it right, fix it right, and know that in your mind you're going to connect to this new pipe with it
down the
next
road.
Floor.
Right.
So make sure that you plan for that.
Yeah. Another thing that we kind of do. It kind of goes along the lines of plumbing, because sometimes we see water intrusion in basements, and we immediately go to okay, this is an older house. We don't, unless a basement is completely waterproofed and finished, we do not advertise a basement as living space. Right. And even then, we prefer to have a bathroom, and we have to have proof that it's actually livable. Right. Just because there's stairs going downstairs doesn't mean it's a livable basement. Right. So when we see water intrusion in basements, we immediately go, oh God, is there a leak somewhere? Is something leaking all over the place? Or two, it's an older home. We can't always force groundwater that comes up. I mean, again, we can mitigate the best we can. Sometimes in these acquisitions, we can see that there's been water level issues, and then our rehab team tries to mitigate that however they can. Right. But something that we don't always think about is sometimes the gutters aren't sufficient. Right. The water table's fine. It's just the downspouts dropping right next to the house, and it's dropping directly. So one thing that you guys do a lot is when you're there, you just look up. Right. Even if you're there to do interior work, we just look outside. Okay, does the gutters look intact? Do they look? Do the downspouts connected? Do they point away from the house? Do we need an extension put in? I know Chris B. He went out and bought 20 or 30 downspout extensions. Just because we just keep them in the trucks. Right. When we go out to properties, oh hey, this is kind of too close to the building. Let's just throw a downspout extension on there. Get it pointed away. The second piece of that is that we have a company that every year in the fall they'll for a small fee, they'll go out and they'll climb up on ladders and clean all the gutters out, clean all the downspouts down.
Oh, that's perfect.
And they'll do exterior inspections for us. They'll say, hey, look, the siding looks pretty beat up. It looks pretty aged. I would suggest this. While I was up there, it looks like you have some shingles pulling up. I looked at your roof cap. They'll go through that entire 360 inspection of the exterior for us. And even if our own, I encourage our owners every year to get it, and I explain, hey, this is not just a gutter cleaning. This is a full service inspection, and it's by a professional that will also warrant their work. So if they go out there and do a gutter cleaning or replacement or something and it fails, they'll go back out and look at it. it.
Just for the record, that's not for the faint of heart. Some of those gutters are 3 stories up, and
Right.
you have to go up in between 2 buildings, and it's not. And so these guys are good, and they have to get up there and deal with it. And there's also raccoons. And
Man, you had to bring up raccoons. Yeah.
But I mean, there's critters. Squirrels and raccoons love the gutters. The gutters are freeways for them.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's just another thing that we do, just generally speaking. And, and then we do have some owners that are like, hey, like, I'm not interested in that. And then we're like, okay, well, we'll go up there. We'll clean your gutters out. And we'll kind of eyeball it, but we're also not roofers. So we can estimate, like, hey, there might be something wrong here. But having that eyeball, $150 for a 2-story building or more, like, you're not going to get that anywhere else.
Well worth it.
100% worth it. And I think probably 90% of our clients actually take advantage of that because it is such a value add. And honestly, like, if it's something small, they can just mitigate right then. Like, they're just like, hey, look, I just went ahead and did this. I tacked this down, or hey, I did that. But they'll send us photos and a full inspection. It's a very intuitive process. It's one of those that no news is good news, because if they say, hey, we just cleaned the gutters, all's good, then they've done the inspection and everything else looks good.
Because ironically, gutters are not that expensive.
No.
So even if you had to replace them, you're not talking about thousands of dollars,
right?
Hundreds of dollars,
right?
And it takes care of the building very well. So
so we talk about all of these things on long-term planning for property maintenance, and kind of some of the strategies there. But to be completely transparent, like, we can't mitigate everything. Like, we're going based off experience, what we see, trends of our experience just personally being years in service, having construction backgrounds, looking at our contracts and, like, what comes with our agreements and things like that. But there are certain things that are just completely unforeseen. You brought up raccoons, man, and there wasn't a situation this week. It came over this weekend where we got a call on a resident. Of course, I was the one taking the maintenance call after hours, and I immediately reached out to you about it. But he's like, yeah, my kitchen ceiling caved in, and we're like, is there water coming in? Like,
well, that would be the assumption.
Yeah, because why would a whole sheet of drywall just fall out of a ceiling? And by the way, this wasn't like a recent patch, so it wasn't like we didn't tack it in. It was.
It's going to be 6 sheets of drywall.
6 sheets of drywall. There you go. A large section of ceiling just came in. Now, luckily, nobody was hurt. Okay. And so we're going through this troubleshooting and trying to figure out what's going on. Is there active water coming in? Like, what's going? Did you get rain? Were you seeing pooling of anything? And even when you went and looked at it, you were like, "No, this stuff's dry.
Yeah, it's bone.
There's nothing wrong. Like, there's something wrong. Like, the ceiling fell in, but there's nothing that indicates that there's been any sort of damage to the system." And I think we came to a conclusion that it was probably a critter, a coon or something that was messing around up there.
The tenant said that they thought that there were raccoons up there. And, well, here's what's odd about it. They put in a work order like a couple days before saying, hey, my kitchen light is loose.
Right. Oh, yeah.
And so I think I had already been scheduled to go out there
on Monday.
To fix that. And before that could happen, the whole thing came in. And I was actually there for another unit before I was able to access that to look at it. And the tenant in that unit we were talking about, he said, yeah, I heard a big old noise. He said, I wonder if it's the raccoons. I said, what? He said, well, there's a hole over the gutter. And I said, what? Show me. And so I went and looked, and there's a hole. Because raccoons, what they like to do is they like to get warm, like everybody else.
Right.
They'll get up, they'll use the gutters and eaves, and they'll try to find a way to dig their way into the attic space.
Right.
And that's what I guess happened. And then they had a big party, and I'm still not clear on how they managed to knock it all down.
Right.
But it all came down.
Yeah, but that's a perfect example of, like, we were already mitigating issues. We were going through the process of identifying like areas to improve the property, and Mother Nature got to it first. And so now like we're like, I mean, the property's being cleaned up.
Right.
Like we've already prepared to go in and put in some more insulation, put in some drywall, and get it mitigated. Residents in good spirits other than the fact that their ceiling caved in.
Yeah, I was surprised at that because they can't live there until
right.
They're working around that. So
yeah, so that's an extreme example of like we can't mitigate everything. I think it would be a little bit different if there was a water leak, but it was like fine one day, not the next. And so now we're going through that process. We've kind of informed the owner, and we've kind of going through that. And there's probably other situations that are similar to that.
Foundation issues. Foundation issues are notorious because, I mean, that foundation could have been great for 150 years, and then this year it decided, or the city decided they were going to change the storm drain system, or Mother Nature decided that the water table was going to shift. Enough. Yeah. And so things like that affect the foundations, and I mean, not generally drastically, but enough to scare people and make things.
Yeah, I mean, or we go through like a week of constant rain with no sun and no breaks, and all of a sudden, like everybody's like, "Oh, my drain's backing up," and it's because this, we can't. The city drains can't handle the influx of water.
Literally backing it back.
Quite literally, and it's not a property issue. Like the property's drains work perfectly fine.
Not a thing to do about
it. But that goes back to we're in the properties a lot.
Right.
We identify wherever we can improve or adjust and plan. But ultimately, things do happen.
Right.
We've had situations where like furnaces have been serviced and everything was great, and then we get one cold day and it just the furnace is like, yeah, no, I give up.
Yeah.
But we can only go based off of the information we receive and the knowledge that we have, and then try to plan accordingly.
It'd be great if we knew in advance of everything that was going to happen. So the trick is to be able to mitigate it well, even if we don't know what's going to happen. Whatever you get thrown at you, just.
Oh yeah, I mean, it would be great to be hey, Friday at 2:30, this property is going to go out.
The tree's going to fall through the roof.
Yeah, I mean, we'd be out there 2 days early, making sure it got fixed. But unfortunately, we try to be proactive as possible. But unfortunately, a lot of maintenance is a reactive state.
Yes.
We can I think we've actually planned to do certain repairs at properties, and then we get work orders the morning of. Hey, by the way, these things are happening now too. Yeah. And now what would have been an hour-long repair is now a 2 or 3 hour repair because there's 4 other things we have to do. So all that's setting expectations, delivering on objectives, and trying to mitigate outcomes the best we can. It's not a perfect science, but when it comes to deferred maintenance and project planning, I know we were talking about parking lot that needs to be redone at our multifamily. It's there's a lot of factors. Besides the fact it's cold, it's all get out right now.
Can't
so it's a heck no for paving anything. We have residents. We have 2 buildings worth of residents, close to 30 residents that park in that parking lot. We've got to figure out how to get them new parking and coordinate the city for drains and permits and all of the things that go into that. It's not something that you just say, "Oh, I'm going to do that on Thursday."
Right. It's an evolution thing too, because these are 3 separate properties, 3 separate buildings. They were.
I think they're 3.5 parcels actually, to be honest. Yeah.
And they were all built by different people, I believe.
Different builders, different times.
Right. But now they're all owned by the same owner, and so all these parking lots need to be rethought and remerged.
Right.
Because if you're going to spend the money to repair it, you might
as well just do it.
Do what needs to be done so that you don't have to worry about it again. And then but it's a process, and you get, like you said, you can't fix. I mean, if a storm drain clogs up and fails, there's not a whole lot we can do about the storm drain failing in the middle of winter.
Right.
All we can do is say, well, okay, that's a springtime. We got to get on that.
Yeah. And then we kind of joked before we came in here, Ohio's the 4 season in a day type of place. Yes. So, I mean, just because today it's 40 some degrees, tomorrow is going to be the 12. The only thing we miss today is some sunshine and,
Right.
and Blue Jays, right?
Right. It's hard to plan except until you get to the known. I mean, you know that after March we can probably
Right.
get things done, but until then we have to just work around it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Dale, I really appreciate you coming on. I think we've had a really intuitive and eventful, coloration of maintenance and what all entails and what all we try to do to influence outcomes. It's a moving target, so it's always hard to do. And even when we're locked on, like things going to turn around and like, so, all right. So I think that's it we have for today. We like to end these things by saying, invest smart.
Live happy.
See you guys.
Nothing on this show should be considered specific personal or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, financial, or business professional for individualized advice. Opinions and information on this show are not guaranteed. All investment strategies have the potential for profit or loss.